Welcome to release 1 of my Rhythmic knit along. The first release is called Soundwave, and this is all inspired by those patterns that you see in sound waves, on music sheets and in chords, so those sort of geometric lines and straight patterns. For me, I love a checked pattern. I find that when I'm designing, a lot of the time I always try and incorporate stripes, plaids, tartans, because I just love that geometric 3-colour pattern that you can always, there's something new and creative that you can do in your own way. So for this first release, we're going to be starting with stranded colour work. So this is where we are going to be carrying floats along the back of our work to create this 2-colour vertical striped pattern with bold 2-row stripe patterns in between. So you'll be learning a few tips and tricks and techniques in these tutorials. So to start with, we'll talk through reading stranded colourwork patterns, and we're going to be showing you a few different ways to hold your yarns when you're holding 2 yarns on a row. So that will be the English or throwing method, or the continental method. So it's really about finding your own flow and choosing what makes you feel more comfortable. Next, we'll be carrying yarn through the back, so you'll be learning how to float these yarns, and I'll be showing you some tips to keep your tension sort of nice and neat while we're on the way. And finally, I'll show you just how to carry your yarn up the side when we're doing the stripe patterns. It's just a great way so you're not sewing in so many ends at the end of this square, so you just have neat lines and it's less sewing in at the end. For release 1, we are going to be working from a written pattern for our stranded colourwork square. So we need to cast on 32 stitches, which I have done here with a cable cast on, but you can choose any cast on you prefer. Each row we are going to be working stocking stitch. So on our right side rows we're going to knit every stitch, and on our wrong side rows we're going to purl every stitch. So to begin, we're going to work by knitting 3 stitches in yarn A, which is my cream. So I'm going to begin by knitting 3 stitches in my cream. In the written pattern, you can see next we're going to knit 2 stitches in yarn C. So I'm going to join in my sage, and I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches in my sage yarn C. So here is where we start to carry our yarn at the back of our work. So I'm going to working in the throwing English method first and demonstrate how to do that. So what I'm going to do is pick up yarn A again, and now I'm going to knit 2 stitches in yarn A. So I'm just carrying the yarn at the back of my work. And to help your tension, just on your right needle you can stretch your stitches out to help with your tension. That means we're not pulling too tightly. So now I've knit my 2 stitches in yarn A, I'm going to drop that yarn and now pick up yarn C again and knit 2 stitches from the back. And in the written pattern we can see that we want to repeat this 7 times. So I'm going to repeat knitting 2 stitches in yarn A, knitting 2 stitches in yarn C 7 times. So just again picking up at the back of our work and knitting to the end. Again, remembering to stretch out our stitches on our right needle to keep our tension nice and not too tight. And once I've repeated those stitches 7 times, we have 1 more stitch to knit in yarn A, and that's the end of our first row. We are then going to turn our work and now work on the wrong side, purling every stitch. So now we're going to start row 2 by purling 3 stitches with yarn A. And now we can see in the written pattern that we want to purl 2 stitches, yarn C, and purl 2 stitches with yarn A, and again repeating that 7 times until the end of the row, and we'll have 1 stitch left which will purl in yarn A. After working row 3 using yarn B and knitting all stitches, and working row 4 using yarn B and purling stitches, we are now going to repeat rows 1 and 2. Here we are demonstrating knitting using 2 hands, so yarn A is held in our right hand using the throwing method, and yarn C is held in our left hand using the continental method. So here you can see we've knit 3 stitches in yarn A, and now 7 times we're repeating knit 2 stitches in yarn C and 2 stitches in yarn A. We are now working row 2 again, which is a wrong side row, so we're now purling using the continental method in our left hand. So here again we are purling 3 stitches using yarn A, and then we are working a repeat, that is 2 stitches in yarn C and 2 stitches in yarn A 7 times. We are now going to demonstrate how to carry your yarn up the side of your work. This helps reduce the amount of ends you have to sew in at the end. So we've now worked rows 1 and 2 once again, so now I'm going to repeat rows 3 and 4. So with this yarn that I have here, my yarn B, I'm just simply going to pull it up and start knitting with it. Just make sure you don't pull it too tightly or else that will pucker your work. So here I'm just going to start with my knit row. So row 3 using yarn B is knit. So I'm going to knit my 1 stitch and just ensure that I'm not pulling that too tightly but carrying the yarn up the side of the work. And now I'm going to knit this row. In the written stranded colourwork pattern, we can see that we repeat rows 1 to 4 5 more times. So our first repeat is rows 1 to 4, and then we'll repeat that 5 more times to have 6 repeats in total. We're going to end with a right side facing for the next row, so we have a knit side to work on next. And then we're going to repeat rows 1 to 2 only, so the stranded colourwork is just repeated 7 more times, so that's 14 more rows, stranded colourwork, and then we cast off. I hope you enjoy making this first stranded colourwork square. Don't forget to share your progress in our Row and Connect Make Along group on Facebook. See you next time!